Hi everyone, this is Dr. Essie Stacey, helping you to be well. Hi everyone, welcome back to the webinars, to the practical demonstrations. I'm really excited about being able to present the desserts. It's great. So I'm going to wait because there's this delay. I'm going to wait a little while for people to log on. And I'm going to, as usual, start with a little bit of theory, just to sort of bring you your focus onto why we're doing this. Obviously, the aim is to give you some delicious food to eat, but also to, at the same time, is to make sure that you have this repertoire of fermented food that you can bring into your life, and that's going to be doing some good for you as well. So the fermented food is great for the guts in terms of the microbes and in terms of the other bioactive substances in them, but it's also, which is so important, vitally important for where we are now in the world we live in now. The fermented food is the sort of prime ammo that we have to break down toxins. So I'm hoping that that all is going well, and we've got enough people that have been able to sign in. And so what I'm going to do is jump over to the first few slides, presentation slides. I'll just check that everyone is okay. I'm going to just type in to say hello. Hi, everyone. And if you have any questions, type them into the chat box. And what I will do is I will, at the end of each section, I'll pick up on all the on the chats and answer any questions that you have. So let me move on to the iPad and me about fermented desserts. So let's have a look. So I know that most of you have tuned in to my talks before. So this isn't, I know for most of you, it's not the first time. But just in case it is, and also I don't really apologize for repeating myself over and over again, because I realize there's a lot of information that I give, and some of it is contradictory to the stuff that's out there. And it takes several goes before we start putting it all together. We make the connections, we join up all the dots. So the fermentation equation is really important, because if you know what elements you've got in your food and in your kitchen, you can understand what's going on, and you can be a little bit more confident about combining foods and things. So with the fermentation equation, we have the microbes which are in the ferment. These are in the ferment, whatever that may be. So that might be the kombucha, it might be the shoikuji, might be the sake leaves, it could be my powders, it could be some coconut yogurt or milk yogurt or kefir that you've got already. And then the ferment eats sugar, needs that as its fuel, and it needs what we call the fermentation media, which is like a bit like, I would say, a bit like the soil that it grows in, the nutrients in the soil that it needs, together with the sugar. So it's those two things. And then it likes that, it feeds on that, and it produces these bioactive substances for us, and it produces more microbes. So when we think of probiotic foods, often we're thinking it's about the bugs, and it is about the bugs, but it's also about these bioactive substances. And sometimes people forget that. For example, if you heat food, sometimes the bioactive substances become more potent. It might kill off some of the microbes, but some of the bioactive substances become more potent. And so sometimes we think, oh, now I've killed off all the bugs, then the food's no good, but that's not necessarily the case. So let's look at some of these bioactive substances from fermentation. So one of the things that we can readily understand is that vitamins are made by those microbes. Really, some of the common ones are things like B12, Vit C are made, and also Bacillus subtilis will make vitamin K2, and we're going to come to that again in a minute. But just to say that the pharmaceutical industry will capitalize on this by fermenting to make medicines. So they use microbes to ferment and make statins. So pravastatin, lovastatin. Pravastatin was one of the first ones. Is a ferment. Is a bioactive substance from a ferment. And antibiotics, pretty powerful antibiotics, are bioactive substances from fermentation. And what is that fermentation media? If you like, the nutrients that we were talking about that the microbe eats. They love things like wheat bran. They love soybean, rice bran, barley. They love the green stuff. They love the fibrous stuff. So they use that. They'll use sugars, and then they'll create these bioactive substances. So that is where we move to the videos, unless we have some questions. So I'll wait for those questions to come through. If you have any, you might not. You should kind of be kind of up to speed now with the idea of this fermentation equation. So I'll jump into chocolate mousse, the little clip that I've got on chocolate mousse. Enjoy. Okay, so for the chocolate mousse, traditional chocolate mousse is eggs and chocolate with maybe cream and maybe sugar as well. So I'm going to use the traditional ingredients, but instead of the milk, because we're milk-free household, I'm using coconut milk, and this is where the ferment bit comes in. For this particular one, I'm using Natto, and yes, it's in a polystyrene thing. That's how it comes, unfortunately. It comes frozen, all in plastic, which is just awful, but so this is Natto, look. And it's an acquired taste, so it's quite difficult to chow down on that for some people. And so I'm going to wait till it's defrosted, and then I'm going to whiz it up with the coconut milk, and we're going to use that as our ferment. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is to melt the chocolate in a bain marie, which is hot water and the chocolate in a bowl. And I'm going to separate the egg yolks from the whites. Okay, so the natto is looking a bit more defrosted now, and there's the melted chocolate, and I've separated the egg yolks from the egg whites. So I'm going to whisk this up. Need a bit of elbow grease. that's kind of enough. Just a bit more. That's enough. It doesn't need to be stiff peaks because as we ferment this, it will get stiff just from the fermentation. So what else am I going to do? So I want to take this lovely natto. You don't have to use it all. You can use a little bit. When you first do it, just use a tiny bit so that you can see whether you like the taste or not. I'm going to put it all in. And natto is good for the K2, amongst other things, the bugs and stuff. But the K2, so if you've got bone issues, then you're going to want to put it all in. And I'm going to whiz that up. So I've got the egg yolks, and I'm going to combine a little bit. So you need this to cool a little bit, otherwise we're going to get curdled egg yolk. Okay, so you put a tiny bit in and stir. And then add the rest. Like that. So you can see it's becoming, it gets thicker like that. And the traditional mousse, we would then combine the egg whites with the chocolate and then put it in the fridge and let it set. But this mousse, the Essie mousse, we're going to now add what we've blended up, that natto, and I'm going to add it again a little slowly, like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just speed the whole process up by putting it. Actually, no, it's going okay. I was going to just whiz it all up, but I think I'll carry on. I'll carry on this way. Like that. And what's going to happen is the bugs in the natto are gonna love feeding on the chocolate and the coconut milk and the egg yolks, the proteins in there. They're gonna love all of that and multiply, which is what we want. Great. And then I'm gonna leave that for a little bit. So let that just sit. Combine a little bit more. So I just want to show you the consistency of this. There's bubbles appearing already, and that's been 15 minutes, but it's not thick enough. This needs to be a bit thicker than that. And so I added too much coconut milk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to melt up some more of this, another bar, and add that. For those that don't know what a bain-marie is, I just thought I'd show you. I've got some hot water in the pan, and I've got the chocolate to melt in the hot water, and I'll put that on the stove. You do that just so that you don't burn the chocolate. So that's all nice and melted, and I'm going to add it in to here and see whether I can thicken it up a little bit. So that's a bit better, a bit thicker. Let's see it there. And then I'm going to leave that again for a little bit. Now I've made it a bit thicker. Let it ferment a little bit, maybe for an hour. So that's been about an hour now, can see that nice and thick. And then what I'm going to do is to fold in the egg whites, sorry. So I'll fold that in. And keep doing it little by little until it's all done. And this can take a while, take a good few minutes to fold in. That's it all done. And I'm going to leave that out of the fridge again for a few hours to ferment. So let's have a look at the mousse. It's been about 3 or so hours. This one hasn't set so much with just the natto. Now you could choose to leave it out of the fridge for however long you like, really. This has been, like I said, about 3 hours, and I'm going to now put it in the fridge to try and get it to settle a little bit. Great. So how was that? We're all obviously mesmerized because there's no questions. So I'm gonna do ask you questions and type them in the box. I'm gonna go to my little presentation for chocolate mousse and natto. Let's have a look. So the natto, the reason why I like to add the natto is because of the vitamin K2. There's other amazing things about it as well, but I'm honing in on K2. So K2, some of you will already know that it's amazing for the bone, and in fact, the Japanese use K2 in high doses to treat osteoporosis. We seem to have never heard of it for that in this country at all, but it is used for that successfully in Japan. And so bone health is useful to prevent fractures. It's useful to improve bone density for arthritis and for gout. And what it does as a vitamin is so vitamin D, we know vitamin D, the role of vitamin D, we think, oh, vitamin D bones, but in fact, what vitamin D does is it causes the absorption of calcium from the gut into the body. In order to get that calcium into your bones, you need K2. And if you don't have enough K2 around, the calcium goes wandering around looking for places to deposit itself. And this is how we get calcification of blood vessels. Obviously, it's not just that. You need inflammation as well. But then the calcium gets taken and it gets deposited in the vessels, including varicose veins. Vitamin K2, it's a relatively modern vitamin. So when I say modern, I think it was discovered in 1978. And well, that's kind of modern for medicine, right? So that means it hasn't hit the mainstream. There's plenty of supplements out there, but I would say the majority of GPs may not be familiar with K2. But it's important for glucose metabolism. It's important for nerve cell health. So things like Alzheimer's. It is important for mitochondrial functions. Remember, the mitochondria is the engine of the cell. It is responsible for giving you ATP and energy. Also for improving muscle function. And teeth. We need vitamin K2 to make strong teeth and also to prevent tooth decay. So a lot of people, when they start taking vitamin K2 supplements, find that their teeth feel sort of smoother. And that's because some of that calcification, which is calcification plus the rubbish The inflammation is what then coats the teeth, and K2 helps you to overcome that. And the most important thing is it's anti-wrinkle. So there was a study which I can't find, which I read a long time ago, that showed that in the areas in Japan where they eat natto for breakfast and they eat it every day, they looked at that population versus the population that didn't eat so much natto. And the population that eats a lot of natto basically had fewer wrinkles, fewer heart disease, fewer diabetes, you name it. So what's not to love there? So what was the recipe? So you know that I'm not keen on amounts, because I want you to be in your kitchen and be able to just like pull stuff together because you understand the fermentation equation. But obviously there was chocolate, there was eggs, coconut milk, natto. Was that it? I think that might have been it. And I see there that let's see whether that will come up on the screen. Rich and so Catherine asked, was that about half a tin of coconut milk? So yes, I think it was about a third of a tin that I put in there, and remembered it was too much. So play around with the quantities. In fact, if you're just making normal chocolate mousse, you don't really have to have coconut milk at all. You could just do the chocolate and the eggs. And so when we're looking at the options, so Vussi's asked, how can you make this vegan? So if you don't do egg, then you can just make that with you could just get rid of that. You could get rid of the eggs. And it would still be good. It's a bit denser without the eggs. It's not so fluffy, but it does work. And what other options can you use? So instead of using the natto, so I'm just going to go back to the natto for a second, in that you could get the powdered variety of natto. I just used the real one to show you, the real one, the full version to show you how it comes and what it looks like. But you can get powdered natto, and then you can just powder stuff in. Some of the other options are you can use kombucha as your ferment instead of the natto, or with the natto. I've used sake leaves before, and that was okay. It wasn't so flavoursome. Obviously, if you're doing just normal milk, you can do that. You know, if milk's okay with you, then you can do that. And milk makes it taste delicious. But most of us can't do milk, so that's where the coconut milk comes in. You can also use my powders. That makes a good one, and that thickens it up a lot, because it's got prebiotic in and probiotic in. So I think that's enough. Let's just have a look. So Lisa's asked, how much coconut milk did you use, and what percent of chocolate? Could I use 7%? Was that too low? No, that was 70% chocolate that I used there. You can use whatever type of chocolate you want. It all works really well. You can use milk chocolate. You can use, the 90% chocolate, the bitter stuff. If you just use cocoa powder, that you don't get those solids that are in the chocolate, so that alters it a little bit. And as I said, the coconut milk is more there for the liquid and to make it creamy. And so play around with the quantities and see what you get, see what comes out. When you make it with kombucha, it comes out really kind of cakey, really kind of thick and cakey. And when you do use the powders, it becomes quite thick as well. So do play around. You've got your normal separation of the eggs and the chocolate, or you're adding to the chocolate, you're adding the ferment and seeing what you get. Great. So I think we're on to very berry now. Do keep those questions coming. and I'll answer them after the next clip. So I'm going to do another easy pudding, dessert, breakfast, yogurt, whatever you want to call it. So I've got some frozen berries. Yeah, you can use fresh ones, obviously, but this is an easy one to do. Have them in the freezer, put them, do them overnight. So I'm going to add some of my powders, just a little teaspoon, and then add the milk. Stir that up and leave it. Just need to leave it. You can leave it overnight, leave it a few hours. The longer you leave it, the more tart it's going to be, the more likely you are to the microbes to eat up all of the sugars in the fruit. And if you like, you can whiz that up to make a smoothie as well. But I'm going to just leave this so you can see what it looks like later. And this is the frozen berries with my powders. I need a good stir, but you can see already, and this has just been maybe 2 hours, you've got them fermenting and doing their stuff. Now if I left it overnight, already overnight they start to become tart, so they're eating up the sugars in the fruit for you and leaving you with more microbes, more antioxidants. Great, hope you enjoyed that one. Very quick, very simple. I'm sure you'll agree that's probably the simplest one that I've got, and really most of us should be able to incorporate that. And when we go through the the presentation on this, then you'll understand why also that we should really try and incorporate this. So I want to answer some of the questions. So Helen sent me a question via email on the chat saying that not good to use uncooked eggs, that a whole load of older people got ill from using uncooked eggs. Now, the interesting thing about that is that when you ferment, you're actually fermenting the eggs, right? So what are you doing if you are fermenting the eggs? You're actually overwhelming the ferment. If you followed some of the other stuff that I've gone through, you're overwhelming that food, if you like, with a certain type of good microbe. So if you think about the traditional societies, Japanese people that ferment everything, the reason that came about and the reason salting and pickling and stuff came about was because there's no refrigeration, right? And the idea behind refrigeration is that you're trying not to allow the bad bugs to grow. So when you ferment something, so we're fermenting the eggs when we're cooking them, when we're making mousse, we are overwhelming the bad bugs with the ferment. And so that's the whole idea, is that if you ferment them for long enough, and so if it's fermented, it's usually something like 7 hours, and there's going to be none of those bad bugs left in there. So if you're really worried about eating raw eggs, either just don't use the eggs or ferment them, say, overnight. And the wonderful thing about this, the chocolate mousse, is that it gets more and more fermented, even if you keep it in the fridge. And my Japanese friend, Yasuko, again, she's in her 70s, I gave her a batch of this, and she kept it, she eked it out for 2 weeks, eating a little bit every day. And that's the Japanese for you. Their ferments go on for months, 6 months. 6 months for a soy sauce is like, the rubbish type, you're looking at 2 years and beyond. And so this is where the understanding comes from. If you've got a bad bug in there with the meats, the reason they can leave it out and not put it in the fridge is because if you're using the shokoji, the kombucha, whatever, they're overwhelming the bad bugs. They're crowding them out. They're eating them. They're killing them. What have you. So I hope that answers that question. What brand of natto or sake leaves? It depends on where you live. So find a Japanese shop and ask them what the best one is. can I use oats milk? This is an interesting question, Regina, because I'm not a fan of those milks. I'm not a fan of nut milks and oat milks. And if you've read my stuff on Diet to Detox, which will be on the new website, which is coming soon, by the way. I think by the end of this month, the website will be going live. I've been putting a whole load of recipes on there and writing a whole load of modules for it. It's an online learning platform for people to learn about their health, not just the webinars, but modules. But the oat milk, the reason I don't like that so much is because of the oats. Oats are good for you. Yes, they're a prebiotic food, but they may be subject to molds. They may be subject to pesticides. And if you can help it, why would you put that stuff in your system? So I'm not a great fan of it for that reason. Is there an alternative to the powders? You don't have to use the powders to make the coconut, to make the fermented mousse. Any ferment, basically. So any ferment that you can think of that is out there, you could potentially put cheese in there if you think about it. You could put some cheese, some good live cheese. How about some Stilton or something like that, and put that in, grate it or something, and put that in and see what happens. If there are live bugs in there, they're going to replicate and do stuff. So play around. I mean, yes, be safe. Use known ferments, but play around and see what the taste comes out as. Okay, let's go back to Very Berry and have a look at some of the write-ups. So I found this paper about fermented blueberries and blackberries. When I first started doing this, like 10 years ago, I could barely find any papers looking at what happens when you ferment foods and things. They're the basic ones, but you're getting more and more of this now. And so basically a study, I think it was done in rats or something like that, but they found that there was an increase in the amount of antioxidants when you ferment the blueberries and blackberries. So this is my bioactive substances coming in. They found that there was a reduction in inflammation. There is an improvement in insulin metabolism, a reduction in body weight and fat mass. So often when people go on diets and lose weight, they'll lose their muscle, which is not a good thing. But with this, you lose the fat. And there was a reduction in the fasting blood glucose level. So what they concluded there was that this mixture was useful for the management of type 2 diabetes. So pretty amazing. And really, if it increases the antioxidants and it reduces inflammation, then you're looking at probably most chronic diseases are going to benefit from this combo. And so what's not to love? Let's just have a look at my powders and what basically they're prebiotics. So they've got things like seaweed in, they've got mushrooms in, they've got natto in there, they've got cinnamon, they've got a bit of cocoa. So they've got prebiotics and they've got probiotics as well as the natto. They have this whole host of beneficial microbes in there. So that's what they're useful for. And I see that. So Catherine's asked, for the Very Berry, is there a alternative? I'm trying to think. You could use natto powder instead of my powders. You could use some old coconut yogurt. So if you've got some you bought from the shop, for example, and you let that ferment a little bit, then you could use that. You can use shoikoji. It's a yeast ferment. Put shoikoji in there. You could try kombucha as well. I don't like actually kombucha would be okay because of the fruit. I don't like adding the kombucha so much to coconut milk, but you can pre-ferment the fruit and then add the coconut milk. It doesn't matter. Give it a go and see see what you come up with. What else? So the recipe, very simple: berries, coconut milk, and some form of ferment. Yeah. So if you really start, just use some coconut yogurt live from the shops. And then what you do is, rather than gobbling it all up, is you take a tiny bit from the old one and use that as your ferment for the new one, if you haven't got powders or what have you. So that's a good way to also to do it. A different look at at that. So any questions? Any more questions on the very berry? Obviously, you don't have to use frozen berries either. You can use fresh berries. Great. So it's mango mousse time. Let's see, where are we? So this dessert is a mango mousse type yogurt, and you just need these two things. Well, in fact, what I've done is I've left the mango, I squirted a bit of kombucha over there overnight so it starts fermenting already, and then I'm going to put the two of them together and whiz them up. There you go, so simple. And I'm going to pour it in the glass and let it ferment some more. Leave that just so that you can see what happens when the bubbles form. I'll cover that just with that, and we'll see how it goes. Great, so another really simple one, and that one was a hit, and you'll see that at the end when we do the taste test. So simple, kids will absolutely love it. You can make ice lollies with that as well. You can, yeah, it's just a good one. That one, again, very simple. And you can get the mango pieces that are, that are reduced because they're started to ferment, in the shops as well, to do that. So that's a very simple one. And Helen has emailed and said that she can highly recommend the powders, and I should tell you all how to get them. The reason they're not out there for general sale on my website is because I'm basically rebranding them, because I spoke to Trading Standards here in Brighton, and she said you're not allowed to put doctor on the label, even though I am a doctor, and what have you. So I am in the process of rebranding them so that doctor's not on there, and even my name doctor and all stuff like that at the bottom, all that has to go. But if you do want some, then email me and I can get some to you. Yeah, no problem. So Joe is saying, I can't have coconut products. Is there an alternative? If you can have milk, Joe, then you can use the milk products. But be careful. I would say get the milk. There's a company called red23.co.uk. I think they're still in business. And they do. They can actually send you milk, which is from grass-fed, well looked after animals. So if you can do milk, then you can ferment the milk. That's an alternative. I'm trying to think what else you might use other than coconut milk. Maybe some people can suggest other things. Let's do some of the comments. So thank you, Catherine. Can't wait to try them. And Lisa said, if you get the powders, can you use them in many other meals? Yes, you can. So basically, I sometimes recommend them just on their own to give you that sort of preparation for the colon to help the gut. And I often start people like that because they can be quite powerful. Particularly if you're not used to fermented foods, they can be quite have a quite a powerful action on the gut. Um, but also you can use them in stews. So in cooked stews, and again they become more powerful. Yes, you're killing off some of the bugs, but the other bioactive substances in become stronger. So I use them all the time. I don't know if you might have been seen one of my webinars where I sort of point out what's in my kitchen. I was thinking about doing that again, by the way, but I put them in my coffee. So I will have coffee, mycotoxin, pesticide-free coffee, and my powders and cocoa beans. I mix the whole lot together. That's my coffee in the morning. What else is there? Is every coconut milk good quality? That's a good question, Regina, because I don't think they are all good. The fewer ingredients, the better on the back. So if they've got I think the guar gum is okay because it's a thickener. That's okay. But if they've got many of the other stuff in, then it's not okay. And also, what we found is that some of the milks, who knows what they do to them, but some of them won't ferment. So if you use the coconut milk and my powders, the milk should start fermenting within a few hours, particularly in the warm weather, as it is right now. You should see within an hour or two bubbles start forming, and if that's not happening, it's usually that they must heat treat it or do something to it so that it's basically dead. So it's difficult. I mean, I use Aroid D. I'm assuming it's okay. It ferments, but I can't be. It's Aroid D. That's one that I use. Let's have a look. Is the next question there? Is that Bulletproof Coffee? Yes, I use Bulletproof Coffee. I don't know whether Bulletproof per se is a brand, but basically you want mycotoxin free and pesticide free. Mycotoxin free, pesticide free, if you can. And what I noticed a big difference when I switched to that. And also, like I said, I combine it with these cocoa beans as well. I buy whole cocoa beans and powder them up and put them all together. And it's a really nice drink. So I do that. So let's have a look at I'm going to whiz now onto some of the theory. So mango mousse recipe was the mango, kombucha, and coconut milk. Obviously, if you can't do coconut milk, then you're doing just milk, or you could not have the coconut in there and just have these two in there. So I'm trying to think, come on guys, I need some more alternatives for coconut milk for someone that can't have coconut. So if you can think of something. Let's, in the meantime, look at kombucha. So what is it? So kombucha is a Scoby. For kombucha making, think of sweet tea. Think of very sweet tea. So sugar and tea and the Scoby. This here is the Scoby. And a Scoby is a symbiotic combination of bacteria and yeasts. And the whiter stuff at the top, you see the paler stuff, that's bacteria. And then the frondy type stuff is yeast. So it's a combination of bacteria and yeast. And it's been around for donkey's years, centuries. And because you can imagine in years gone by, you couldn't just rock up and drink any old water. So you're going to drink wine, beer, or something fermented. That's what was safe. And so kombucha was a safe ferment to drink, a safe liquid, and it's been shown to be anti-inflammation. Anything that reduces inflammation then is useful for all chronic diseases. So cancers, cholesterol going down, blood glucose going down. So kombucha is good for all of those, and it's not just because because of the bugs, but because of the bioactive substances as well. So there have been some papers, and they found that the acetic acid bacteria, so think of vinegar, acetic acid, vinegar. So those bacteria that are associated with the vinegar making, they produce this cellulose. Cellulose is like the plant fiber cellulose, and that's fiber, yeah, and it's also protective for the liver. That's really important because there's been an explosion of something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So the liver disease, not from drinking alcohol. And what is it from what is it from? It's from sugars. It's from sugars and grains. And likely toxins as well, because the liver can't deal with it and produces all this fat. It's called fatty liver. You might have heard of that. Fatty liver. You might have heard of that. So we need foods that are going to prevent, some of us may have the early stages. When I see patients, and if I have to get some blood tests done to look at their levels of inflammation, sometimes the liver comes back and it's struggling. And this is in people they're not drinking, and they wouldn't really know that they have issues with their liver. These are the early stages. So there's many other bacteria also in kombucha, many, 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 many more than your billion probiotic. And let's have a look. Yeast as well. Lots of different types of this. This is Zygosaccharomyces. So Saccharomyces is the one that's the bread yeast, the brewer's yeast as well. That family, very hardy family of yeast, and Candida in there. So we're going to think now, but isn't Candida bad for you? But there are different types. I think there's Candida, it's called Candida Kombucha or something like that. I don't know. But it's Candida albicans is the one that gives us thrush and is associated with ill health. But the kombucha has myriads of other wonderful microbes in it. And the beauty of having something like kombucha is that it's different every day because it's changing and multiplying, and each day your body's getting a different look at the microbe each day. Whereas if you take a probiotic, it's going to have a specific amount of this thing, that thing, and you're going to take that same thing every day. Whereas the body likes diversity. It likes looking at different microbes and different bioactive substances. So this is the beauty of eating the fermented food rather than having the probiotic. However, in the early stages, if you're returning to health, then having a probiotic is a good way to control that process. Good. So let me just, so we said almond milk and hazelnut milk are out. I would say so. I'm just really skeptical about these nut milks. Lukey, what is tiger nut milk? I've not heard of that. Perhaps you can enlighten me. I'm just not a fan of those milks at all. I'm going to need a lot of convincing for me to say that those nut milks are any good. And when we've done the toxins, if you listen to the toxins talk, I talked about why there's issues with those, because with the nuts, anything that's been dried is going to be subject to pesticides, molds, and who knows what else. And they're there in that substance, and then it doesn't matter what you do with it. You're making a milk out of it. It looks all nice and white and what have you, but it's still in that product. And so, I'm going to take a lot of convincing before I say that those things are okay. Okay, so what's next? The velvet ice cream. I think this is the last recipe. Okay, so this one is sake lees pudding, and my friend Yasko showed me how to make this. And for those that haven't seen this before, this is the sake lees. It's your yeast left over from sake beer. So that's going in because that's the ferment, and it gives it this sort of creamy flavour. So I put about that much in, and I'm going to add some sugar because it's gonna ferment it, but it still needs to taste nice as well. That goes in there. Some coconut cream milk and a slosh of vanilla essence as well. So that's a bit lumpy, so I might just whiz that up again. That smells delicious. Still a bit lumpy, so you know I would really need to do it again a little bit more. But I'm going to leave it there to ferment a little while, and then I'm making an ice cream with this. So then after that, after I've left it, I'm going to leave it for maybe 2 hours, and then I'm going to put it in the freezer. So when you're making the ice cream, you have to put it in the freezer for maybe an hour, bring it out, give it a good stir, put it back, unless you've got one of those super different ice cream makers that freezes it and whizzes it around for you. So I'm going to leave this for a couple of hours to ferment first. So I want to have a look and see what's going on with my ferment. So this is the sake lees ice cream, and that's, you can see the bubbles. So that's great. So I'm going to put that in the fridge now, freezer, sorry, and start that arduous process of bringing it in and out. So I'll put it in the freezer for about an hour and then bring it out and give it a stir. So I've taken this out after an hour in the freezing. See, it's really quite thick. And I'm going to give that a really good stir and put it back in. So the idea is that you keep doing that so that the water crystals don't form and make it like a horrible sorbet. Not that sorbet is horrible, but you know what I mean. So you want to keep that creamy texture throughout. So you have to keep doing that. So I'm going to give it a good stir and then put it back in for another hour. Okay, so that's it after 2 hours. It's looking a bit more like, it's doing well actually. It's doing really well. I'm not actually sure I need much else. I'm going to leave it for 1 more hour, I think. It's really not going crystally at all. It's just behaving like delicious ice cream. Look at that. Okay, 1 more hour and then we're done. So I was so proud of that ice cream. Anyway, you can have a look at the taste test at the end to see what was what with that. Let me have a look at the questions. So Regina says, if you roast nuts, is it still toxic? That's a really good question, and I don't know. So I'll find out that one maybe for next time. Is there a certain brand? Like I said, find out who the Japanese people are in your area and make friends with them. I think that keeps coming as a question. And then, is that cane sugar or coconut sugar? That was raw cane sugar, but you can use coconut sugar as well. And you don't have to use sugar at all, Lisa, in that recipe, because the microbes will eat the coconut milk and they'll use that as their fuel as well. So you don't have to use sugar, or use a small amount and then let it ferment for a longer period of time. So again, you'll get used to knowing how much sugar you can put in it and how long you're going to leave it before it's tart enough. So yeah, that's about kind of understanding your body and understand the temperature, because if it's hot outside, it's going to ferment. If it's hot in your kitchen, it's going to ferment really quickly. Put it in the fridge, it's going to in the freezer, of course. For it will still multiply, but very, very slowly in the freezer. So you might want to leave it out for, say, overnight, and then put it in the freezer. Lovely and creamy. Yeah, it is. It's absolutely it is high end. I was really surprised at how that came out. So let me go to have a look at some of this stuff on the theoretical point. So I used the sake leaves. I used egg. I used sugar and coconut milk. And the proportions, again, don't really matter. Just, tear off a little bit and throw it in. And you need enough liquid to sort of bring it together. So it's not too runny. And of course, you could play around with that recipe and put some fruit in there, maybe, with the sake leaves. And you could just put the fruit and the sake leaves together with and see what happens with that. You've got your ferment, which is the sake leaves, and then you've got your sugar, which is the fruit, and the media, the nutrients which are in the fruit also. That's the sake leaves again. Again, I don't know whether this is a brand. Kuni Zakari is a brand at all. But like I say, try and find a Japanese shop or what have you near you or in your region. So sake leaves is leftover from the sake beer making, and the main microbe is Aspergillus oryzae, which is a yeast. But there's also Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which is that brewer's yeast again, the bread yeast, the brewer's yeast. But there's loads of other things. There's like Lactobacillus paracasea. I was going to kind of look at the different microbes and what the studies have shown about them, but I'll be here forever doing that. Bacillus. Now, if you take your stuff down to the local microbiology lab and put shoikuji in it and take it to the local microbiology lab, they're going to come back with woo 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 woo, like you've got bacillus, it's going to kill you stuff in it. But there's so many different strains, if you like, species of bacillus, and Bacillus subtilis, B subtilis, is what makes K2, right? And K2, remember, that's that stuff that's good for your bones, it's good for your wrinkles. So if sake's got a little bit of that in there, and other stuff that we don't even know about yet, then that's another one to add to the repertoire. So, and there's likely to be many others in there. So a couple of papers looked at the positive effects of having sake leaves, and one of them here is ACE inhibitor properties. Now, ACE inhibitor, angiotensin converting enzyme, is what's used in blood pressure lowering pills, right? So for blood pressure. So why go for the pills when you can have some sake leaves? It also improves allergic rhinitis, so runny noses, improved energy. They looked at some rats and gave half of them sake leaves, and half of them not that. The ones that had their sake leaves were moving around and had so much more energy than the other ones. So get some sake leaves in, and also it's doing that liver protection again. I think that's it for, I think we're on to the summary after that. So let me get some questions. just going to go back. Let's get some questions or comments. If someone doesn't have a problem with milk, what do you think of cultured creme fraiche? Yeah, the thing about the milk is it needs to come from, it's not just about being cultured, it's also that it's from a cow that's not been fed the horrible stuff. So the cow needs to have been fed grass and not grains. The cake that animals often get fed in the winter is grains. And it's that. Not only does the grains may have pesticides and mold, so you're going to be worried about that. Let me just go back to me. But also, if the animal has been fed grains, it alters the animal's fat. So animals produce this fat called conjugated linoleic acid, CLA, and that is like a wonder molecule that is anti-cancer, anti-inflammation, all those things. But the interesting thing is when you feed the animal grains, it stops producing that, and it produces the other version that is bad for you. Yeah, so it's really important that you know what the animal has been fed. So the grass-fed animal, so you get the milk from the grass-fed animal, and then you ferment that, that's likely to be good for you. Good. Any other questions coming up there or comments? And yeah, so let's have a look and enjoy this taste test. Okay, tasting time. So we've got Chief Taster and Tasting Uncle. Right, let's go for maybe let's do that one first.
Okay,
this one.
am I just throwing it into my...
Yeah.
Yeah. Just deal with it.
You're going to tell me what it is? And my mum
Yes, it's let's get vegetables. Berries and fermented coconut and my powder.
Should I take one of these spoons?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Anna, I'm going to put some in there. Okay. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I like it. I mean, I think it's that balance between the sweet and the kind of fermentedness of it, which I quite like.
There's a tartness
Yeah.
There is absolutely, yeah.
And the savoury.
Savoury?
Yeah.
Is it flavoursome, Hannah?
Yeah, it is. It's the fruit.
Fruit. Go on then. In it goes.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you have it for breakfast?
I can have it whenever.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be with the food.
What are you thinking of it as a breakfast kind of thing, or just
Either breakfast or dessert. Yeah.
I love
Help
it.
the food go down, you know. Excellent.
This looks...
Okay, choose.
I'll
What's
just do
next?
this one.
That one. Go on then.
Okay, you go for it then.
That's
All
the
right.
mango mousse.
Oh,
Oh, I
mango.
love mango. Anything mango.
Okay, nice and fermented. That's it, Hannah. You got to
Pile it on. I'm not holding back.
Yellow. And it's banana.
Where is it?
Yeah, colour.
Banana colour, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I got that.
Colourful. Like a rainbow.
Yeah. Again, it kind of that whole balance thing, I think, of the fermentedness.
Is there still some sweet in it?
Yeah, there is
Okay.
actually, and I would say I need
So
at least a sweetness.
Yeah,
with
you
it.
need a bit of
Yeah.
sweet. Hannah?
I think this is syrup.
Syrup. Does it
Yeah.
taste like syrup? That must be very sweet tasting then.
Yeah, it's syrup and honey.
You can sense the fizziness as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Hannah's eating it. That's going down a treat, isn't it?
I love it. I love my big one. Alright.
Right, let's go for the chocolate mousse.
Smile.
Mousse. Mousse.
I just said maybe just a bit more. Just okay.
Okay, go on, Hannah. Your turn. What? There's no sugar in it.
You can really sense the darkness.
Yeah.
With a bit of cocoa.
And you wouldn't need a lot of this.
Yeah, it's rich.
Yeah.
Hannah, what do you
A bit
think?
like cocoa.
A bit like cocoa.
Yeah, like a chocolatey.
Chocolatey.
It is.
And it's creamy.
It's really rich, but lovely. I mean, you can pile on the pound.
Oh, it is. It's very, very tart. It's not very tart. It's just what you say. It's rich.
Yeah.
It's very. As Hannah said, it's very cocoa-y, isn't it, Hannah?
Yeah, it is.
Really.
Yeah. So you can put more milk in it. You can put more sugar in it. But this is like the raw thing. But it's got natto in it. This has got.
Oh.
You wouldn't know, would you?
No.
So you didn't know
Chocolate
at all. You wouldn't have. You wouldn't have
With a
thought.
bit like chocolate cake.
A bit like
Still
chocolate
lovely.
cake. Excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, it's just a little kind of pudding.
Okay, so have a go at this one and tell me what you think it tastes like.
Okay.
This is an ice cream.
Ice cream.
It's an ice cream.
Are you sure?
Yep. A bit more, yeah.
Well, it looks
Does it
different.
look like ice
I
cream?
mean, it does. It does, but it's maybe it's because it doesn't shine or isn't glistening like the usual ones. You know what I mean?
The ones that
You
got
know?
goodness knows what in to
Yeah.
make them do that.
Okay.
This out.
Okay.
What are you getting?
I can't pinpoint the flavour.
No, not all of it,
no.
because other people might want some.
It's nice, but there's nothing sweet about it.
Not sweet.
It's not sweet. I can't. Obviously, I'm imagining vanilla's in it somewhere or other.
Yes, you've got a bit of vanilla. Creamy or?
Yeah, it's creamy, absolutely. When you drink, the texture is really nice.
Yeah, excellent. Hannah, what do you think?
Is it like a savoury type thing going on?
Sake. It's sake. It's the sake leaves. So
Well, it's caramel.
caramel. Yeah, caramel tasting.
Well, I add vanilla.
And vanilla.
Oh yeah, but like ice creams.
Yeah. So it's a sort of a, what would you say, like this gourmet, high-end.
It really is.
Yeah.
I would definitely say
Yeah.
high end.
It's not your eat a whole tub all in one go.
No, absolutely no. I'm quite good at that.
Excellent. So good.
I love tubs.
Do you like that one, Hannah?
I do. It's my favorite. It's my favorite ice cream tub.
Excellent. Well, that's good then.
Yeah.
Yeah? So we've got some
Some
fermented
fudge.
puddings.
Yeah, no result.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Thumbs up. That's what I say.
That was great. It was wonderful to see their faces. Hannah particularly loved that sake leaves, and it is really rich and it really is velvety, sort of gourmet. You don't, well, most people wouldn't want to eat too much. It's very rich and silky on the tongue, but she says she wants a tub for her birthday, so I'm going to make some for her birthday. And they all went down well. The chocolate mousse, I didn't add any sugar to that at all. And if you're trying to get, I mean, Hannah's a hardened fermented foodie now, so she doesn't really notice the lack of sugar. But if you're trying to get kids on board with this, or you're not, you're not really into fermented foods, you're just trying them for the first time, then do put creamy stuff in, either cream or creamy coconut milk or sugar or both. Because the wonderful thing is then your taste buds begin to get used to the tartness over time, and then you can reduce all of that stuff afterwards. So Regina said, so good cow milk would be better than oats milk. Yes, I would. I'm just not a fan of the oats milk. But also just be careful. You've got to really find some. I've searched high and low for good cow milk, and you're not going to get it from the supermarket. Put it that way. And even then, a lot of people, even with good grass-fed, a lot of people react to that. If they've got some underlying health issues, that they'll still react. I think milk is one of the things that people are most reactive to, and also a lot of ethnic populations will, as they get older, not be able to process milk. So just be aware of that. Can we use bananas instead of mangoes? Absolutely, yeah. Try different fruits, and in fact, those bananas may be a good substitute for the coconut milk for Joe, maybe. So instead of using coconut milk, maybe use mashed up bananas with some water. So if you whiz them up, that might work. Good. So let's look at let's just look at summary for that. So we've gone through all of our recipes, and so if you're trying to kind of put your own together, obviously just try mine. If you want the slides, then email me. I can send you the slides, no problem. So we're looking at fruit. So, I've used berries, I've used mangoes. Change the fruit. Like I say, yes, do use the and bananas. I use chocolate. Helen. So yeah, let's just move on. Ferment. For the ferment, you try different ones. You've got kombucha, you've got my powders, you've got sake leaves. And Helen emailed to say amazake. So amazake tends to be readily available. It's got an E on the end. And that is, again, as a rice ferment made, I believe it is made from sake leaves, very sweet. And so you could use, it's a pudding on its own, amazake. So you use it as a pudding, or use a bit of it in your dessert or your pudding. That you take some sugar, because the ferment will eat some of the sugar. These guys will use it as fuel, remember, although it doesn't all go. So even in something that's very tart, you will still have a little bit of sugar in there. But a little bit of sugar is not so bad if it's feeding good microbes. If it's feeding bad microbes, then it is bad. So it's about understanding that sugar isn't to be completely crossed off the list. It's just understanding that if you're combining it with good microbes, then there's I've got this analogy of the good tree, bad tree. The good tree is the good microbes, and the bad tree is the bad microbes, and they both feed on sugar. But if you've got more of the bad tree, then the bad tree is going to grow more than the good tree. And then your liquid, coconut milk, normal milk, eggs, leave to ferment 1 to 12 hours, even longer. But if you're new to fermenting, you're going to leave it a tiny bit. If you're seasoned fermenter, you might leave it a lot longer. And then make something. Start with something. Start with anything. Start with simple things. Start with complicated things, and begin to enjoy that. So I hope we got a lot out of that. Some more foods for your repertoire. And that is about it. So I'm going to be back in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks, doing back to the practical things. I'm going to look at the hierarchy of health, and we did toxins, and now we're on to the gut itself. So I'll be explaining the basics again about why we get sick from the angle of the gut, what goes wrong with the gut. So we're working our way through these theoretical sessions of working our way through the hierarchy of health. And I have got some people lined up to come in soon with looking at the subconscious and how the subconscious affects healing. We've got Subrachi, who's on this call. She'll be coming, and I have Dr. Stephen Brook. He'll be talking about the heart as well. So once they're ready to roll, then I'll be slotting them in as well. I was thinking of doing, and it kind of depends on the responses I get, is to look at what's in my kitchen, because you see my kitchen, it's a mess. There's bottles everywhere and stuff sort of fungating and all stuff like that. It's perhaps just going around the kitchen and just showing you what is that, why am I doing that, what have I got there, and why. And so if you think that is something that you'd like to you'd also like me to cover, along with a question and answer. It might be a question. I can't help people in terms of give a consultation, but I can answer general questions about health and how one might tackle certain health problems. So I could do that mixed in with what's in my kitchen. So I might do that if I get enough yay responses for that. So I'm just looking at the question. So Catherine says, would I use tin coconut rather than a carton? The ROID comes in both tins and cartons. So I just happen to have lots of those. The cartons, what I found is those carton milks tend to be worse than, I won't mention the names, but the cartons of milk that you buy in the supermarkets, they tend not to ferment very well. They've got a lot of funny additives in that just kill the microbes. I don't actually know Lucy B, Catherine, so I can't answer that. Any other questions coming through before I sign off? So like I said, if you want me to do the what's in my kitchen thing, I need you to say yes about that, because I just kind of thought about it at the top of my head, but I don't really know whether it's a good idea and whether it's just going to bore you to tears anyway. The one that I'm going to do after the next theory one will be breads, because I did batters, but I haven't done bread. So that will be probably in about a month. Right, so I'm going to sign off there and say see you in 2 weeks. Okay, I was going to sign off, and then everyone started replying because of the delay. So people are saying yes, please, and kitchen so useful. So yeah, I will. I'll think about doing that. You could just email me and tell me what you think, really. If you don't get a chance to write it in the chat. So I'm gonna put the outro on, and yeah, do keep chatting until it's all over. Bye everyone. That's it for now, everyone. Remember, change starts with you. Be well.